Just to confuse everyone, we've sat completely different to what's behind us, so you'll have to pay attention. Firstly, I'd like to start by welcoming our wonderful panellists here. We have Daniel McGregor, a director from Naked Wealth, Emma Baxter, also a director at YOUtax, and Dr. Luke Martin from Beyond Blue, the engagement manager there. Welcome and thank you for your time today. As you know, the topic's about financial wellbeing in times of crisis, and I'm sure many of us are feeling the cost of living pressures at present, and so are many of the employees around us. So I wanted to start off really with just talking quickly a little bit about what do we mean when we talk about financial wellbeing. And there has been a definition that was derived with the University of Melbourne and with CBA Bank, and they talked about being able to meet your financial obligations, so pay your bills, really being able to make choices that allow you to enjoy life, so being able to go out for dinner and entertainment and all of those sorts of things, be able to control your finances, so avoiding unnecessary fees and charges, as well as feeling secure about your future obligations. So being able to make choices that allow you to actually put money away for those rainy days as well. We recently did a survey amongst some of our member organisations of 8,000 employees, and we asked about some of the external sources of stress, and we saw that about 30% of people reported that they are finding financial stress external to their workplace. Some of the recent things that we've seen also around some research around people living paycheck to paycheck. Latest data showed that this has grown from 28% in 2017 to 42% in 2022. The greatest growth in those without savings to rely on is for people earning greater than $100,000, and that shifted from 27% in 2019 to 44% in 2022. So quite a substantial jump of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, and it's not just people on the lower incomes. So Luke, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you, the work that you've done with a report recently, Money and Mental Health, that was done in conjunction with Beyond Blue and ASIC. Can you tell me what impacts that you're seeing and what is the link between money and our mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at Beyond Blue, we're pretty concerned about what's going on for community at the moment and the mental impacts of the cost of living crisis. A couple of years ago, we did a report with ASIC, as Kim mentioned, where in Australia, we didn't actually have a lot of data. Like I used to work as a practicing psychologist, and I'd see people in the room who really, when they're struggling financially, they go into this kind of survivor mode where they operate with high levels of stress and not a lot of bandwidth to kind of handle things coming from around the corner. And that cycle of worrying about money, which then makes you more likely to be experiencing poor mental health, which then makes it more likely that you can't get on top of your money, which then makes you feel worse about your life and how it's going, is a bit of a spiral we used to see clinically, but we didn't have a lot of data in Australia to kind of validate that. So a couple of years ago, we partnered with ASIC to release this Money and Mental Health report, and it really validated what we all know. So if you're experiencing financial stress, you're twice as likely to be experiencing a mental health condition, and vice versa. So if you're experiencing a mental health condition, you're twice as likely to be experiencing financial distress. And it's that cycle, and what the report called the downward spiral can happen, where people kind of get caught in this downward loop, and it moves a bit faster than they anticipate. But I guess the good news story is that the report also identified a lot of turning points or ways we can create upward spirals for people. So I think I'm looking forward to talking about those today as well.
Okay. And what about you guys are on the coalface with your YOUtax, with your business. Emma, tell me a little bit about what you're actually seeing in the day-to-day interactions that you're having with people. What are the main areas of concern?
Yeah, so we're talking directly to employees of organisations. I am an accountant, I am a tax accountant, so I'm sitting there speaking to them on a day-to-day basis. And we find that there's a lot of overwhelmment and a lot of stress. So we've even had times where we're on Zoom and Teams calls where we are, kind of in a face-to-face environment, and you do see the emotion and the tears well up in their eyes when you're giving them a tax outcome that they were either they were not expecting. They didn't know certain aspects of their tax return or their salary or something would be affected that way. And so we do sit in those positions, and we tend to be the the go-between between the ATO and the community. So we're, either sometimes we're delivering bad news, sometimes we're delivering good news. In times of COVID, it was like, here, take your money. Now it is, the government has pulled back. We don't have the lower middle income tax offsets anymore. We've got changes in working from home legislation. And, the way that, and it was done so quickly, those laws only changed on the 1st of March, and they're retrospective of the whole year. So with that, if they're not looking at, the news of the commissioner on the news or something like that, how else are they going to get that information? So through their organisations and through their employers who have hybrid work environments is a really good way to deliver the changes in those laws. And yeah, this year is going to be a very tough year talking to clients this year, and I'm not looking forward to it, but we're here to support them as best we can and to explain the changes, explain what's going on. And as you mentioned, it is a lot in the higher income earners, of 120 plus who are really struggling as well. And, and the low income earners for years, they've become quite resilient and to their circumstances, but with, what's going on in housing, it's been quite a challenge for them.
And what about you, Daniel? Correct me if I'm wrong, you're sort of collecting a bit of data almost real time because you've got people interacting with the app and your website and the work that you're doing with the Naked Will. What are you kind of seeing as the key things people are asking about or looking for in terms of advice at the moment?
Well, as a financial advisor, we're seeing people getting into mortgage stress quite substantially now, as a lot of people are coming off fixed rate mortgages. People starting to take on second jobs because they just need more cash flow. People reaching out for more help and support. We're seeing people burning through their savings. So as Emma alluded to, we saw during COVID, COVID felt really bad from an economic perspective in some respects, but for many people in Australia, they actually built up their savings. They were getting government support. They couldn't spend their money on anything because they were locked up at home, so just binging on Netflix. So many Australians actually built up their savings, and we're now seeing those being rapidly depleted to try and keep up with these cost of living pressures, which, again, as Emma alluded to, is impacting on everybody, not just low income earners, and we're seeing this right across the board. No one's able to avoid these cost of living increases, and at all income levels, if people have taken on too much debt as well, then we're seeing mortgage stress right across the board.
Yeah. And I know historically, I guess, businesses haven't always been there to sort of look at financial wellbeing, but we now ask people to come to work as their whole self, so we have to look at all the challenges that are facing them. What are you sort of seeing as a role and the sort of the benefits for employers to actually provide support around financial wellbeing, and that might be in the form of education or financial advice? I mean, what are the positive benefits for employers here, and what are you seeing in terms of the employees themselves who have maybe been through a process of planning or whatever, and the outcomes that you're seeing there? So maybe I can start with you again, Luke.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think the basic business case holds for, I think some of the stats show that about 78% of people in financial stress say that it impacts them at work, their ability to concentrate, their ability to stay on task, to be motivated, their morale, their attendance rates. So there is obviously that benefit that everyone here knows about, which is really, I guess, important to acknowledge. The other thing that we're seeing is really interesting is even extending that link to if financial wellbeing is part of the way the company thinks, not only for their own staff, but for their customers, that creates this positive shared value kind of synergy effect that happens, where in the case of say, a bank, for example, being able to think about your customers' financial wellbeing actually helps them stay a customer for longer, but it also helps them be able to manage the debt they're managing, as well as if you can build the capacity of your staff to have those conversations. There's kind of wins in a lot of different directions when we take this shared value lens to the promotion of wellbeing in many facets.
And what about you, Emma?
Yeah, well, this is something that we try to promote in the space of understanding what financial wellbeing services are important and what to have on that platform. In many respects, HR is like, okay, let's provide this service, and there's a lot of do-it-yourself services. So there's a difference between having resources that for your employees, but also having the advisory support as well, where people can get that personalised advice and things like that. That's what we've found an important need that's come out in pretty much the last 2 years. What we've seen is when there's been changes to salary and benefits inside organisations, that if that is affecting their tax, then it's about them becoming informed what's happening in the future, not what's just going on in now, so that they can make better decisions. It's not just improving financial literacy, because there is information that changes constantly, but bringing it in a timely manner. So if you're going to be talking about superannuation, talking about it in, say, March, April, May is very relevant to talking about it in August, September, because then it's giving them information and time to act. There's a lot of, employees with HECS debts who had significant impacts on their loans this year with indexation rates at 7.1%, and they kind of felt like their hands were tied, that there wasn't any support or things that they could do in that instance. And there is also the fact that there's increasing pressure coming from the government and the ATO. The changes in laws sees revised down deductions, and history says that when there is times of financial stress, people tend to like to inflate their deductions in their tax return a little bit more, thinking that they might be able to risk or run the gauntlet of an audit or review. However, the government's given the ATO more power to audit and review in the in the number of $86.5 million. So they've given, so they're actually looking at people, making them not only the stresses of what's going on financially, but the compliance burden that they're putting on them to prove those deductions in their tax return. And that's where there needs to be a little bit more guidance and advice.
Daniel, anything to add on that? I'm just taking a mental note, make sure I do my tax right this year.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the benefits to employers?
Yeah, what do you see? You've got an app, and I'm interested to know how people are interacting with that as well. And are you seeing an uptick in the last couple of years too, as we are increasing in terms of concerns? Are you seeing an increased use? And
most definitely. I mean, what we're seeing from a lot of employers is if they actually ask their staff, they say they want help in the financial space. Financial wellbeing is something that's been overlooked in most workplaces. Physical, mental wellbeing has been a priority. Financial wellbeing has kind of been put in the too hard basket. But there are some great providers out there now who, I'm dressed up as a financial fitness trainer. There's all sorts of stuff we can do to help employees get confident with money. And I think that's the key. The benefit, if we can get employees confident about money and making financial decisions and empower them with financial education, they can make better financial decisions, reduce their financial stress, and as an employer, you get a more productive workforce because they turn up at work, much less stress. Money is the number one cause of stress. It's the number one cause of relationship breakdowns. And yet there hasn't to date been that much engagement in this space, but there really is starting to be an increased awareness that employers can add great value to their employees' lives and their own bottom lines by starting to work in the financial wellbeing space.
just touching on that point when you said about people interacting, why are we all so scared of the financial sort of stuff? I think there's, or are we just not, like, is it scary? Is it, what's the barriers we're seeing? Because I know personally, you kind of go, oh, tax time, oh, bad budgets, but some people absolutely love it. How do we make ourselves more literate? What are some of the barriers we can overcome individually, I think, and then as employers to help our staff?
I think it's such an interesting point, and it came up a lot in our research, where there was almost this sense that we've spoken so much about mental health stigma over the last 20 years and had such great progress on that front, but it's almost like financial well-being is the last of the stigmas. And the fact that you're more willing to talk to a friend or a colleague about how you're feeling than you are about your bank account is a truism that kind of resonated with a lot of people. So there is almost another stigma challenge here around how do we normalise that needing to stay on top of your money and needing to learn how to manage your money is something we all have to do as adults. And I think what's really careful in the messaging here is, I think particularly during a cost of living crisis where we're all faced with an external stressor we're trying to react to and manage, it's not about the personal. It's not about you as an individual need to do better. It's really around how do we navigate these tough times, because one of the things that came up in our research was this tendency for people to tie their net worth to their self-worth. And if they're struggling financially, they feel they're failing as a person in life. And if we are not careful with our messaging, if we make this about you need to do better, I think we risk colluding with the stigma that it's a personal failing. Whereas I think if we can broaden the conversation a little bit around, like, how do we navigate these waters at the moment as a community? How do we we do need to get better at learning and manage our money. I'm the first to admit that for myself. But equally, how do we do it in a way that's not shaming or blaming, I think is
Luke, I can
part
help
of
you
it.
with that.
That'd be great.
No, I mean, that's so true, because I think you think about the whole stigma piece, you're right, and we do feel like, how do I say I'm just not doing well at the moment? And much of it's what's occurring now is up, as you say, beyond some people's own control. So how do you find a buffer, and how do we think about our money in a different way than in a positive sense? So
Well, for many of us, we grew up where money was a taboo subject. You didn't talk about how much you earn, otherwise you were big noting yourself. You didn't talk about the mistakes you made, otherwise it carried the shame. The amount of times that a client will call us, or we'll talk to a client who apologises to me in the first few minutes of a conversation of how they've left their tax affairs, or what mistake they've made or investment mistake they've made. And it's too common for them to come in and apologise when we need them to feel welcome to come and ask for help. And that's where many people, you know, I'm in the accounting space, so I can only speak on this behalf. I am an exponential planner, however, so I've seen it across many years, but you know, in this space, they think that they go and see their advisor once a year. However, keeping that connection with them, and through employers and companies who can continue keeping that connection with the information, with the updated advice, with changes in legislation, what's going on the budget and how it affects them, having that internal in your organisation, because I think we've turned to a point where employees, now they've changed the privacy rules on income and things like that. Employees are talking more and they are supporting each other more, but it's only within their secure groups. It's not actually coming wider. But yeah, like you said, tying to their financial net worth to their self-worth, that's, I find that a lot in the clients that I see, and it's really challenging to overcome.
And that sort of goes into that now. You know, how do we be more proactive and, you know, and preventative? You know, what are some of the things that employers can do? But also, you know, we're all in the room here as individuals. What are some of the, you know, proactive and preventative things, Daniel, in your experience, and what are you advising people to do?
Well, for employers, what they can be doing is helping their employees with their financial literacy. Because I think, going back a step to your previous question, I mean, that's I think the key here is Australia has very low financial literacy. And the reality is that that's not anybody's fault, because we don't know what we don't know. And we don't get taught this stuff in school. There is a growing amount of financial education in school, but even then, school kids aren't living in the real world. Once they're in the real world and they're in the workplace, that's where financial education can really add a huge amount of value by empowering people with really good quality financial knowledge. I think Google, social media to an extent has muddied the waters, because if people go Googling and looking for information, or they're scrolling through their social media feeds, they're coming across things like Bitcoin, which, don't buy Bitcoin. If you have any, maybe hang on to them, but Bitcoin's not an investment. But people are being sold all sorts of garbage when financial literacy is actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. So that's where I think employers can add huge value for their employees in giving them high quality financial education so they can make better financial decisions. At an individual level, you touched on it in your opening before, rainy day money is just one of the most basic things that most people don't have. Building up that buffer so that you've got something put away, but people might call it a cash reserve or an emergency fund, but that's how you can cushion yourself when some tough times come along. But most people don't have any rainy day money. So when the rainy day comes along, they're already in financial stress straight away. So they're the sort of simple things where we can engage with people and help them to take these simple steps. And then it's a step-by-step approach. Once they do that, they can then build on that and continue to make better and better financial decisions and prepare themselves for a better financial future.
And also that instinct to think that they have to go out and earn more money to solve the problems. And by going out earning more money to try and solve the problem, you've given yourself less time to learn about the problems that you have and getting the right information. They think just if I earn more money, I'll solve the problem, but they're not getting to the root of what it would be.
That's a massive point to focus on, I think, here, given the environment we're in. There's going to be a lot of employees who are going to start to feel financially stressed in the next little while, and they're going to be starting to look around for higher paying jobs, not because they're unhappy at work, but because they think they need a higher income. And in many cases, we've been talking about financial stress being a growing issue for relatively high income earners. In many cases, what they need is help to actually manage the income they're already receiving better. And it's a chance for employers to save on recruitment costs if they can retain the staff they've already got.
That's funny. My father, whose favourite saying was, "Don't tell me what you earn, tell me what you spend." And he was always about, controlling your expenditure. Don't know if it's held me in good stead, but but what about you? What are some of the things? How do we reduce stigma? In the research that you've got, what are some of the really positive things that we can do about being proactive and preventative?
Yeah, so we just yesterday actually released a new resource with Financial Counselling Australia, which kind of tackles this exact question. So what we noticed was, as we know with mental health, also with financial distress, there is this delay for help seeking until a crisis point. But when you dig a little bit deeper, there are actually like little mini invitations that people put out a bit earlier. But when those invitations aren't picked up by someone around that person, they go back underground for a bit longer, and there might be another little one, and they go back underground again, and they pop up at a crisis point. And so we've created what we're calling it's like the money and mental health continuum, where it takes from a point of thriving right through to a point of crisis, what it looks like from a money and a mental health perspective about someone's state of the situation. And so what we're trying to do with that tool is go to workplaces and also financial service providers and utility providers to educate on what those earliest signs of concern look like. So I think it's very clear when someone's in distress, but what do the early signs of trouble look like? And so some of it's the basic mental health first aid stuff that we know when there's a change in behaviour, a change in mood, someone's withdrawing, they're not concentrating, their performance is dropping a little bit. But some of it's stuff that Daniel was talking about around if someone's saying that they've got no savings, they're needing to borrow money, they're getting in kind of bad credit cycles. What are those earliest indications? And I think, broadening the lens a little bit, what's really exciting is we're doing a lot of work with banks and utility providers who are super interested in using some more sophisticated data modelling to catch people earlier, because they've got quite good protocols around vulnerability and hardship teams, but they're wanting to catch people earlier. So I think there's good consensus around the need to intervene earlier. So it's an exciting kind of conversation, I think.
I think that's interesting too, because I noticed some of the utility companies are now sending monthly bills, and I think it's about helping people manage smaller amounts. Sometimes getting that shock at 3 months might be more difficult. And I'm just curious, is it whether that's where they're using that sort of data points along the way to, as you say, help intervene early before people get into distress.
Exactly right, yeah. And there's a whole bunch of different ways they're piloting and experimenting in a way that's not kind of overly intrusive or not looking like there's kind of ethical issues, but how do we just use the data picture we've got to pick trends in who might need that gentle message that support is available in a way that doesn't feel too personalised. It feels a bit more, this is how we talk to everybody, and particularly they find framing the support as a right. It's your right to draw on the support that's available rather than people feeling like they're a burden for asking for help, I think is a language tweak that's quite interesting.
And I think that's a good way to wrap up too, just around that sort of financial distress. You know, what's best practice ways about supporting people who have ended up, unfortunately, in financial distress? What are some things that companies can do and what individuals can do in the last minute that we've got? Go.
In a 2-second nutshell, National Debt Helpline run by Financial Counselling Australia is free financial counselling. 2, Beyond Blue, we've got a lot of support services, more than just a helpline. Jump onto the website. But those two, the world of finance, the world of mental health, our research actually showed that taking action in one area also helps the other as a secondary benefit, even if you don't directly do anything there. So those two options, I think, are the two I'd say in 2 seconds, but not sure if there are others.
Well, the only other one I'd just add in there is people can reach out to their bank and talk to them early. Don't wait until the last minute when the bank's about to foreclose. Talk to them and try and see if they can help map out a plan to reduce repayments.
And that is also the same goes for the ATO. They may be, having these compliance situations, but they are open to conversations on acting early in situations, knowing when there's debt coming. There are situations where we act on behalf in getting interest and penalties remitted off accounts. So they do consider financial hardship in their situation around tax and things like that. But I'm all for preemptive strategies, get in early, have general information provided to your employees as best as you can, and having it readily available.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. If anyone would like to find out more, Daniel and both Emma are in the booths out there, have lots of amazing advice. I've had a little look around too. And also Luke, I'm sure people can reach out to you if they wanted to as well via Beyond Blue, but there's some excellent resources. But thank you everyone for your time today. I hope you've taken away something of value.
Thank you.